So we are recording on Zoom, and I'll start the show. On this week's episode of the Crushing Debt podcast, excuse me, ma'am, your wage gap is showing. So welcome back to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt podcast. My name is Sean Yesner with Yesner Law, and I have a guest on this week's show. But before I get to my guest, I do want to talk real quick about our show's sponsor. Those of you that have been longtime listeners know Sam Cohen at Attorneys First Insurance. He's the sponsor of the Crushing Debt podcast. Sam writes errors and omissions insurance or malpractice insurance or E&O coverage. It's all the same thing for attorneys and title companies all over the country. In fact, if he does not write in your state, let us know, and he'll either become licensed in your state or he'll find someone in your state. But what I love about Sam is his apples to apples comparison when you're trying to figure out what the best malpractice coverage is for you. So if you want to contact Sam, it is sam@attorneysfirst.com, or his website is attorneysfirst.com. And thank you, Sam. He's a great supporter of the show. A lot of the improvements to the show were from things that he suggested. And if it's a change that I made that you don't like, then it's probably my fault, not Sam's. So with that, I want to introduce my guest this week. So my guest, is a 20-year, 5-time entrepreneur and the CEO of Selling with Service. She empowers women to make money and create change. In her flagship program, the Sales School for Entrepreneurs, she teaches solopreneurs how to create a high-touch, low-tech service business so they can experience their first of forever 5-figure months. She's an accomplished speaker. She brings wit and wisdom to her frequent appearances on podcasts, although I think she likes mine the best, regional and national conferences on subjects of women's empowerment, sales, and money. Welcome, my guest, Liz Dederer. Welcome, Liz.
Welcome, my host, Sean. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Fabulous. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so I want to sort of jump right in.
Let's do it.
One of the topics we talked about and the title that I picked for the show, and we went back to, I recall one of the episodes of my show, one of the episodes of the podcast was an interview that I did with an attorney, woman, a solopreneur, Black woman, friend of mine. And it was all during the beginning of the pandemic when race relations were kind of tight. And the concept of the show was, what can I do to be better? And I think I'm pretty good. I don't think I'm racist. I don't think I see color. I don't think I see gender, but the question was, how can I be better? And so that was, at least at the beginning, sort of the tone I wanted to take for this show. And one of the things that I was thinking about in terms of before we started recording here is, I am surrounded by women at the office. My assistant is a woman. My bankruptcy paralegal is a woman. My associate attorney is a woman. And when I hired my associate attorney, the salary that I offered her really wouldn't have mattered in my mind had she been a man or a woman. It's a base salary and a percentage of profits that the firm brings in. And so whether you're a man or a woman, if you want to make more money, bring in more work. Am I wrong? Am I a chauvinist now?
No, you're not a chauvinist. Are you wrong? It's a yes and. So I'll go easy on you, Sean. I'll go easy on you here.
Okay.
So I just want to point out something that is going to be a controversial statement, but I'm going to never stop me before, that we're all racist. And we just have to own that we are. We've been raised and indoctrinated in a very racist society. So we all have some sort of unconscious bias, and we have to own that. And then it's our job, especially as white people, to recognize where that is and then unlearn it. Period. It's our responsibility. And that's my stance on that. Second, to the point about the wage gap, right? No one is sitting there saying, haha, she has boobs, I'm going to pay her less. Like, that's not how that works. However, and 90% of the population does have an unconscious bias that is negative towards women. That's not 90% of men. That's 90% of the population. And I can see it in myself. and I hate it every time that I do, and I want to cut my eyes out every time that I do. And when I say something that I hear is negative against another woman, or thinking that a man is better or smarter, it's just so indoctrinated into us that we cannot think that we are immune to it.
So
We
how would it manifest? How would I know that I'm having that kind of a thought?
Let me show you how it manifests, and then we can tackle part two of that question.
Sure.
So there's 1,000 different ways that it manifests, but I'll use some data around some different things. So we think that wage gap is just like, she has boobs, I'm going to pay her less, right? That's where we think it shows up, and that's just not accurate, right? That's the cartoon version of it. Wage gap exists across all industries. It is not just reserved to corporate. Wage gap exists in sales. How does wage gap exist in sales if you just go out there and you sell more? Well, there's a lot of reasons. One, sales is predominantly a male trade. However, women are better at selling. Women close 11% higher than men. However, women are only 20% of the sales managers and trainers. So we're being trained the masculine way, but we're better at it. And then we're being told that we're not as good because we're being judged as a fish with their ability to climb a tree.
But
So that's
if I were to say to my associate, like I said, she gets part of her salary as a percentage of sales.
mhm.
So if she brings in more than I do, then she theoretically would make more than I did.
Sure.
Now that probably is a bad example because as the owner, I get to, pull the profits off the top.
Yeah.
But theoretically, if she sold more, then she would make more.
Okay. So let's look at the gig economy, so we can see where the blind biases really show up, because it's not black and white.
Okay.
There's so many layers that go into this. Let's look at the gig economy, Uber, Lyft, whatever, right? You don't get to choose who your driver is. You don't get to choose who's bringing you your Starbucks that day, right? That's just, you go on the app. If anything, they choose you. So how is there such a wage gap in the gig economy? Great question, Sean. I'll tell you. Here's where it shows up. And this is pre-COVID stats, but the game's not going to change much on the other side of COVID.
Right.
The gig economy is based on supply and demand. The busier the times are, the higher the rates are, those drivers are going to make more money. When are the busiest times? Commuting time and bar time. When are women less accessible? Commuting time, because we're the primary caregivers, right? And
Right.
why don't we want to take the bar shift?
Danger element.
Yeah, I don't want to die.
Right.
Not interested in picking up a car full of drunk dudes and getting raped that night. Like, it's just not really, I'll save my $20, I'm good.
Right.
Right. So it's because of the systemic issue of how women are looked at so differently and how we are held at a different standard, if you will, and we are objectified. That's where the wage gap starts to show up. It was not until 1988 that a woman was able to get a loan for her own business without a man's signature. 1974, rewinding a little bit, is when a married woman was finally able to get a bank account on her own without her husband's signature. And we wonder why the divorce rates skyrocketed after that, right? So we've never had equal access to money. And then you layer race into that.
Yeah.
Those are white people statistics, right? And yes, it was across the board that any woman could. Really? Sure, on paper.
I was 2. I didn't have anything to do with it in 19.
It's all your fault, Sean. That's why I'm here. It's your fault. You are to blame.
I was
my
2
secret
in
Trojan horse agenda.
1974.
I wasn't born yet.
So, well, and I debated whether I was going to make that comment or not, but
all good. It's all good.
So what do I do? I mean, am I doomed because I'm a white male, or is there something I can do about it?
Yeah, that's great. So no, you're not doomed because you're a white male, right? You are increasingly in the minority, but you are not doomed. There's a lot of ways we can address this. You know, the fun that I have with the title, "Excuse me, ma'am, your wage gap is showing," which was turning into a stage show pre-COVID. I was going to bring in drag queens. It was going to be phenomenal. It's going to happen.
Okay.
It will at some point. But the fun that I have with "Excuse me, ma'am, your wage gap is showing" is it's titled that way to put the ownership back on women, right? "Excuse me, ma'am, your wage gap is showing." And I'll show you a couple places where we do it to ourselves, right? That's one of the key points is women do it to ourselves.
Okay.
We're horrible. We're vicious to other women. We're mean girls. Like it can get bad. And the other way we do it is in small, seemingly innocuous comments and phrases. "I'm sorry." That's a big one. "Just," when we kneecap sentences.
Yeah. Wait,
That's a big one.
how is "I'm sorry"? How is "I'm sorry" bad?
Great question. So like if you bump into somebody with your cart at Aldi, right? Do it lightly, social experiment. Do not say the last time you do it, right? I don't need that.
Russian Get podcast does not endorse smashing people with shopping carts.
Exactly. But we all do it accidentally. You accidentally bump into someone. They apologize, especially if it's a woman. When I'm in a store and a woman's standing there smelling all the candles, and I do social experiments all the time, and I start kind of encroaching on her space, she will apologize and move out of the way. Those are the instances. Start noticing that it is all the time.
I hadn't know. Now, if I I think that I would do it if somebody bumped into me. "I'm sorry for getting in the way." I think my natural reaction would be to say it from that perspective of "I'm sorry, I'm in the way." Um, I don't know. It's interesting. I'd never thought of that before.
As women, it's important more than ever that we're hyper aware of these small ways that we disempower ourselves because we come from a disadvantaged perspective to begin with.
Okay.
So it's even more important that we do not apologize for existing and taking up space.
I get it. Okay. That makes sense.
The other way that wage gap exists is the pink tax.
What's the pink tax?
All right. So, real blind study, a pink razor costs more than a man's razor.
Really? I my wife buys her razors, I buy mine. I've never priced them against each other before, ever.
It's fascinating. Ellen DeGeneres had a whole skit about it when Bic came out with lady pens. Pens for ladies in pink and purple. And guess what? They were higher than the black pens. This is not, you cannot make this stuff up.
So something that reminds me of, so, as soon as, not as soon as, but after we're done with this interview, I got to run to take my son to flag football practice, and he's also playing soccer. And so we were at the sporting goods store Wednesday, and they had a special on if you bought the cleats and the shin guards and the soccer ball, you got a discount on the package. And the only soccer balls they had in his size for one brand had some pink and purple in them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I grabbed the ball, and here's a ball, and and he didn't want it. Now, he didn't say because it looks like a girl's ball or it's a pink and purple ball, but I guess I could tell that that's the reason he didn't want it. And so we found a different brand that had a similar special, and it was a ball that had, white and blue and whatnot. And he got the blue shin guards and the black and blue shoes and all that stuff. Should I be trying to, I don't know. I don't even know how to ask the question. I mean,
Neutralize the color. The gender separation starts, pre-birth, right? The normalizing of the separation of genders starts pre-birth, and the normalizing of men as the superior gender starts pre-birth.
yeah.
Pink is a color. It's not a girl's color. Society has made it that way. Blue is a color. It's not a boy's color. Society has made it that way. Green is not neutral. Society has made it that way. Yellow, same, right? It starts early on, right? The shirts that start to say, for the onesies that say, "I'm too pretty to do math. My daddy won't let me date. Boys don't look at me." Onesies,
Yeah.
onesies.
But how do we, I mean, how can you even begin? I mean, I guess the only thing that I can really do is, because I have two boys, and I will tell, and maybe this is even just as bad a statement as we were talking about, but I know that if I had had a girl, I would be a disaster. She would have me wrapped around her little finger, and I'd be the dad cleaning the shotgun when the boys came to date her. So
Why aren't you cleaning the shotgun when the girls come to date your sons? Because in my opinion, we're way more vicious.
true.
But
That's
why is that not a thought?
I I
That's
don't.
that's exact. And
Yeah.
I'm not meaning to attack. I'm just taking a strong stance because hi, I'm Liz. It's nice to meet you. This is what I do.
Right.
But this is where I just challenge you. Why is it a thought that it's socially acceptable to say to a woman's son that I will murder your child if you bring your son around my daughter? And that's totally okay to say. The fact that we're really creating aggressive men, right? And that
Right.
that's socially acceptable, that it's okay for the rape culture to exist. But because we have to protect women, I'm a woman, I've grown up with women, all my friends are women.
Yeah.
We're vicious as all can be. So if you're
Right.
going to protect anybody, you start cleaning that shotgun to protect your sons from us women because we start early.
Yeah. Which interestingly makes sense for my life, because of all the women I've dated, I'm the one, and not my wife. I love my wife. My wife is fantastic, but the ones before her, yeah, they were the ones cheating on me, not the other way around.
Yeah.
Huh.
And it's
So
not even the cheating, right? It's just, but the societal
the
norm
viciousness,
is,
yeah,
yeah, the attack, right? We're hunters too in
right,
our own ways, right? Um, the societal norm is that women are the weaker ones and have to be protected, and that daddy's got to have the shotgun and she's not allowed to date. Why not? Why aren't your sons not allowed to date? Why isn't the narrative on a boy's onesie? It's usually something about handsome, and it's usually something about, some sort of chest pounding narrative.
right, right. So then what do I do as a dad with two boys that are, relatively young? They're both under 10. My oldest is 9. So what are some things I can do now to start to change that, or start to change the narrative within their heads?
100%. I love that you're asking the question. My daughter's 9. You normalize emotions first and foremost. That's one of the ways that we start the gender gap, is that we don't allow boys and men to have emotions, which is where the inherent aggression comes from, which is why 82% of serial killers are men. Got some pent up rage. This is why the overwhelming close to 95% of mass shooters, which is a statement that only exists in the United States, 80, close to 95% of mass shooters are white men, because of the pent up aggression and rage, because emotions are not normalized within men. So one of the things you can do from the early onset is allow for them to cry, to have emotions, to feel all the things, and that's okay. My daughter just had a bullying situation with a boy, and I do Facebook lives every day, and she's getting better at joining me with them. She got on to talk about it, and a friend of mine commented, "Oh, he's got a crush on her," and I put the brakes on the conversation real quick, and I said, "Hold on. I don't care if he's got a crush on her. You do not treat people like that. And we do not normalize aggression as a way to demonstrate affection. Their emotional immaturity and insecurity is not my daughter's problem.
Right.
I was in a domestic abuse relationship. My daughter's father was a very abusive man, because that is so normalized. Not because, but there's a lot of reasons, right? But
Right.
it's very normalized. It's
Well,
very, very normalized.
so now you're making me feel bad, because so my son just had surgery to remove a cyst on his thyroid, and
Ooh,
he's fine. Doctor
awesome.
got it all, not
Yay.
cancerous. Everything is great. But when my son was curious about, he's got a 3-inch, horizontal incision that's healing up, and everything,
Yeah.
and it's looking fine. You can't really tell unless I tell you it's there. But my comment, innocently, I didn't really mean anything by it. My comment was, chicks dig scars. But now I'm kicking myself.
It's all good. And this is a great opportunity for you, and totally one of the ways that you can normalize this is by you showing up in vulnerability to model that for your son and to say, hey, I just listened to this amazing woman on a podcast
Right.
and she schooled me on a few things. And one of the things that I want to say is that I didn't realize that that little statement that I shared with you is not 100% right. And here's why it's not 100% right to say what I said. And when you can start showing up in that vulnerability and unlearning things in real time, that will have more of an impact on your boys than anything else they would see societally or read from a book or anything else. When their biggest role is unlearning things in front of them, what?
Yeah.
You just wrote them a huge permission slip for the rest of their life to question everything that they are taught societally, that how men are supposed to act is a bunch of BS.
Right.
That's toxic masculinity. You have absolute ability to completely create an entirely different narrative for your boys and all the women and other men that they come encounter to.
Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I will work on that.
My daughter will put them in your place, in their place.
Anytime. Anytime. So trying to turn this back towards the Crushing Debt podcast. How do we help, or how do we eliminate, or how do we lessen this wage gap? What can I do as a law firm owner with 3 women who work for me, with 1 associate attorney who I'm trying to mentor to be a good attorney as well? How do it can't be, raise her income. There's got to be something I can do to get rid of this, at least in my own little world. What can I do?
So there's a lot of really interesting things. One is I would make this, look at what your company's initiatives are annually, 3-year plan, 5-year plan. Mine obviously includes, social activism and diversity. So that's something that we keep on our line of sight in our team meetings. What are we doing this quarter, this year, to start closing things up and empowering women to make more money? Obviously, that's my business. That's what we do. But from a racial justice perspective, what are we contributing to? What are we doing? It's a very focused line item. You cannot fix what you do not focus on, and what you focus on expands. So to make it a line item, to say, how are we going to word this? How do we want to focus on this? And what can I do to make your lives easier? I think the first step is having this conversation. I think the second is to start to recognize where these small inequities that add up over time. So we talked about the pink tax from a very literal pink and blue perspective, that pink things are more expensive. There's also other ways that it shows up. Insurance premiums are higher for women, right? Student loans are higher for women. There's so many stats out there about average things that are higher for women, and then coupled with we get paid less. Tampons are taxed in many states still as a luxury item.
Wow.
Do you have tampons in your bathroom at work? Keep them available. You have toilet paper, that's not a question, but
Yeah.
nobody offers tampons and pads in their bathrooms in public places because it's like, we don't talk about that stuff.
Yeah.
But you have
Oh,
toilet paper.
right.
If men bled, there would be tampons hanging from every light switch, right?
Right.
Things to normalize. Do you keep some Midol in the office? Things to normalize that conversation. Those sort of things are how you start. It seems so weird and
Yeah.
disconnected, but it actually is relevant to the entire equation.
Okay.
Tipping women higher at restaurants. Tipping higher, period. Like, just don't eat out if you can't tip. Like, there's,
Right.
if you can't double digit tip, stay home.
Okay.
Just saying. And to notice that women bear the brunt of the childcare costs. Women bear the brunt of the time of the childcare. How is she being extra compensated for that? Do the
Well,
women in your office, are they bearing the brunt of the childcare in their home? And how can you have a conversation, maybe not to pay them more, but to pay them the same to do more work remotely, or to do less work or to do job sharing or things like that? Where can you start to get creative to help them make their life easier?
Yeah. Well, and I've only got one at the office who I believe could have children. One of the three, um, or wants to have children, maybe is the more accurate statement. Um, so that is something I can do. And I know at some point, yeah, I probably need to get some kind of policy in place that if she does want to start having kids, how are we going to handle that at the office? And having just been through it, I think I would be um, open or I don't know what the right word is, but to put some kind of maternity leave policy in place and then work from home policy or something like
I
that.
would invite you to consider a family, I forget how it's worded exactly, but paternity and maternity leave.
Yeah.
Because when it's just maternity, again, it puts the emphasis of childcare on the mother
Mom.
and the father goes back to work. Why can't fathers be the ones normalized to bear the brunt of the childcare in the early days? My body just went through a war zone. I couldn't stand up for 2 days.
Yeah.
Every time that I stood up, my ankle swelled bigger than my head. Right. So the men are the ones who need to bear the brunt, and they can't do it because they have to go back to work. So it is normalized from birth that women are the primary childcare providers.
Well, and I
You
think,
can change a diaper just as good as anybody.
well, yeah, and I've changed my share, but I think in my mind it was just a function of, at least for right now, the makeup of the firm is me and three women. So, and I know me and my wife are not having any more kids. So it was
It's
from
less about where you are now, and it's more about the tone and intentionality that you want to set and the
right.
culture that you're creating. It really comes down to not how am I going to solve the problem, but what really is the problem that we're trying to address here.
Well,
And
and
it's
that had not, I had not even considered the fact that I still do want to grow the law firm. And so maybe the next hire is a man. And then what if him and his wife want to have kids? And then what's so I understand what you're saying there. The not a maternity policy or a paternity policy, just a new baby policy.
family expansion
Yeah,
policy,
family expansion
family
policy.
leave, or you need to go to the IVF appointments, or
Right.
you want to go to the just regular baby appointments, or whatever it is, just to normalize it across the board that, parenting is not a gender role. It's just parenting,
Right. Well, and
straight
I
up
think
parenting.
I'm going to give myself props because when my son was going through his issue and needed to have the surgery, yeah, my wife and I split time where sometimes she would take off work and take him to the doctor's appointment. Sometimes I would take off work and take him to the doctor's appointment. If I had a hearing or a podcast interview or something that I could not move, then she would do it. And if I
Yep.
was free and got it in my calendar and didn't schedule anything, and I did it. So I'm going to give myself points for that.
Yay.
So
Love it.
again, sort of turning back to crushing debt. One of the other things I wanted to talk to you about. Well, first, before I go there, I do want to give out your contact information. So the website is sellingwithservice.com. People can reach you at Liz, Liz, at sellingwithservice.com. You're on Facebook, Selling with Service. YouTube is Liz Dederer. LinkedIn is Liz Dederer. And I liked your Instagram, Holy Shift Your Sales.
Yep.
And I'll put all those in the notes. So anyone that wants
Yeah.
to connect with you at those sites, they can go to the notes and click on the button. So I did want to give your contact information out, but I also wanted to talk about one of the topics here, which I think may sort of be in line, creating and it was in your bio as well, creating a business model, an invisible business model that leads to 5-figure months on the regular.
Mm-hmm.
So from a perspective of, and I think this might even sort of tie in with what we were talking about in terms of the wage gap and solopreneurs, whether they be men or women. How do we get a 5-figure regular month?
So this is where I really teach and preach to the entrepreneurial minimum wage of 120,000. I've been in this space now working with primarily women business owners for the better part of the last decade. And one of the things I found, and this is again part of the wage gap, and where I say, excuse me, ma'am, your wage gap is showing, is that women tend to undershoot their earning potential. And when I would work with a woman, a solo startup service company, what do you want your annual income to be? What do you want your revenue goal to be? 9 out of 10 times it was around what their previous income was from their job. Now, the problem with that is then you've got business expenses and all the other things coming out of it. So they were actually stepping into a reverse pay experience, which they didn't recognize until I pointed it out to them. So that's where I took the guesswork out of the equation. I said, you don't get to tell me how much you want to make. I'm going to tell you because you're going to shoot your number too low. It's 120,000 is the entrepreneurial minimum wage. That divides very nicely into $10,000 months. Boom, 5-figure months going forward. So how we get there is really simply math. We need to reverse engineer. What is it that you're selling? For how much? How many of those do you need to sell every month to get to 10,000? And now that we know what that number is, now we need to say, how many sales calls do you need to have to get to that close number? What needs to happen before the sales call to get people to the sales call? And then we just look at your sales process. I do this with consulting clients, creating a sales strategy playbook for their companies so that they have their entire sales process mapped out. And then we know where we need to focus to really streamline and to optimize their conversion rates at any given point.
Okay.
It comes down, this is why I call it the invisible business model, is because with a service-based business, it's this ethereal, invisible thing. So people think, oh, I'm just here and I can get on the phone and whatever, blah, blah, blah. And oh, it varies per client. And I've heard it all. I've heard it all. It doesn't matter. It's a business. There's a process. It's math.
So I know that you work mostly with women. Do you work with men as well, or is it just women?
Sean, you might fit into the equation.
Right.
We
Okay.
might allow it. Just the cool ones.
I'll stop telling my kid that chicks dig scars, and maybe I'll get into the.
There we go.
And then the other thing I wanted to ask you, right now you're on the East Coast of Florida.
Yes.
And you're coming out here to the West Coast?
I am. Get ready.
Woohoo. And so does it matter where someone's located if they want to work with you?
No. I have clients all over the globe. Yeah.
Okay. So in the last couple of minutes before we put a bow on this episode, it's probably a loaded question, but is there anything we didn't talk about? Anything I missed? Any final comments you want to add?
Yes, there is. This is the leading cause of wage gap. I have to say it. You invited me. I mean,
Go for it.
All right. It's in the media kit that you have. It says it in there.
Okay.
So I have to talk about the leading cause of wage gap. And this is where, again, it's excuse me, ma'am, your wage gap is showing, right? I talked about the I'm sorry. I talked about it's just all of those kind of kneecapper sentences. There's another really big way that women are causing their own wage gap, and it's faking it.
Okay.
Faking orgasms is the leading cause of wage gap, and I'm going to break it down as to why.
Okay.
We as women do not have the confidence and ability and authority to communicate what we want and need with someone else who's equally naked and vulnerable in an invited situation that is set with pleasure and excitement. If we can, in that energy, ask for what we want, how are we going to ask for it anywhere else? And if we're allowing ourselves to be gypped of an experience, how are we going to demand and command that we receive that anywhere else? We need to stop that. It is okay to say, you're not doing it for me. It's all good. It's all good. Yeah. Have that conversation. And if you can't have that conversation with love, you're probably not emotionally mature enough to be engaging. Just a thought. Just a thought. The other side of the coin to that is we as women are so sick and tired of men mansplaining to us, thinking that they know all the things and taking credit for things that they didn't do,
Right.
we are literally giving them credit for things they did not do. And then men are thinking that they're able to do things that they are not actually able to do. And that bleeds right over into business. So, ladies, close your wage gap, stop faking it, communicate. You deserve pleasure and you deserve to be paid.
Wow. I'm trying to think. I was looking away because I got the bookshelf here at home. There was a book that my wife asked me to read, which I did before we got married, about that subject and about putting her needs first. And I can't remember the name of the book, but I will, as soon as we're done with the interview, I'll grab it and I'll put it in my,
email it to me, because of course it's going to be one I want to read for sure.
Yeah, it was something. I'll get it and I'll email it to you. But wow. So okay, so I got some homework to do on my end, I think is what I'm getting out of today's interview.
And your wife will thank me, and all the women listening will thank me, and the men will thank me too. You're welcome. You're welcome. This is Selling with Service.
So I very, very much appreciate you being a guest on this week's episode. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And again, if you want to contact Liz, sellingwithservice.com or liz@sellingwithservice.com. I'll put all the other social media notes in here. But I think that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. Like I like to say at the end of every episode, I hope that at the end of the month, you have more money rather than at the end of the money, you have more month. Hopefully you picked up some tips to help with that in this week's episode. But that'll do it for this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. And I look forward to talking to you in next week's episode. Cool. So we're done there. And I'm going to stop recording on Zoom now as well.